Hey everyone, it's me, Flaro Spider, and now I just want to say Happy New Year to everyone who is watching this, because by the time of this recording, it's 2023, and the last video I made, it was 2022. And now I promised some more horror content, so now I'm going to be doing a ranking on one of my favorite horror movie franchises, along with one of my favorite franchises ever, quite possibly, for movies. It is A Nightmare on Elm Street, which I'm pretty sure anyone who's a horror fan knows what that is. But I'm going to be ranking all 9 of the movies, including the Friday the 13th crossover film, Freddy vs. Jason, from worst to best. And I want to tell you all, this is not exactly the real list, it's just my opinion, so if yours is any different from mine, please don't get offended. So, yeah, I also want to say, make sure you subscribe to me if you want more content, and leave a like on this video, and comment below what your ranking is, and what you thought of mine, etc. And also, let me know any video ideas. But now that it is 2023, I can feel a little bit more confident to make DC videos. But I'll get back to that when I feel like it. But for now, let's get on to this list. Coming in at dead last is The Nightmare on Elm Street Rehash. Now, oh boy, this is not only the worst film of this franchise, but also the worst horror movie I've ever seen, and one of my least favorite movies of all time. Like, I'd say in the top 3, along with Cuties and Dragon Ball Evolution. Yeah, those 2 names are names of movies that a lot of you hate, I'm sure, if you've ever came across them. And if you did, then that will show you how much I hate this movie. The reason why is because, to quote Sean Chandler about Freddys Den, The Final Nightmare, this film is a nightmare, but for all the wrong reasons. There's so much wrong with this movie. The practical effects from the original are replaced with shitty CGI, and a lot of the characters' names are flipped around, like, I don't even remember, but there's definitely some of that. And one of the worst crimes this movie commits is having it be an entire rehash of the original. Now, I'm not saying all remakes are inherently bad, but this should have been a bit more creative. Like, and whatever you do, just don't waste your time on this movie. Go watch the original, unless you want to torture yourself. Another thing that's so bad about this is Freddy Krueger being a pedophile. Yes, you heard that correctly. Which, here's the thing. Freddy being a child murderer, that's scary, but a pedophile is too far, because of how disgusting it is. There's even a rape scene. And this movie not only rehashes a lot from the original, but also from some of the other films in the franchise. Like Nancy or Tina. It's been a while since I watched this movie, so I can't really remember some of the characters' names, but they were chased by Freddy in a dream, drowning in a puddle of blood, and Freddy said, "How's this for a wet dream?" quoting the Dream Master. And then later in the movie, it really tends to show it's like someone who's seen the original had a dirty mind when they came up with this one. When Freddy ties Nancy to the bed, calling for her boyfriend, then gets on top of her saying, "I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy." Why? And another thing that's wrong with this is how when Freddy gets brought into the real world, his head gets chopped off. When Nancy says, "Welcome to my world, bitch." Okay, now we're ripping off Freddy vs. Jason. Huh. It's like all this movie can do is just rehash. Like, the scenes, the lines, and if you've seen any of the other movies before you watch this, then you would understand how bad it is and how it kind of gets ridiculous too on how much this movie lacks creativity. And if there's anything the movies above it do good at, it's creativity in their own way. And this movie does not do that whatsoever. And there's probably some other parts of this movie wrong with it that I did not even mention. And if that's true, then please comment below. And I kind of question why there's some who even like this movie. I understand, Jackie Earle Haley, not a bad performance, but still, he could have been good if it weren't for the writing here. Anyway, I don't know what else to say other than this movie is hot garbage, and I know this is an exaggeration, but I think I'd rather have Freddy Krueger himself haunt me in my dreams than ever watch this again. Coming in at the top 8 is Freddys Den, The Final Nightmare. Now, if you've seen one video I made last year, that was called 10 bad movies that could have been great, you know that I'm not really a big fan of this movie, but the remake is the only movie on this list that is so bad to the point where I'd call it the worst horror movie ever made, not just the worst Nightmare on Elm Street movie ever made, and also one of my worst movies ever, in my opinion. Well, from here on up, all these movies are at least watchable for me. Like, I'd still recommend them, despite how bad some of them are. This movie, I'll talk about the good first. I like the story with the bringing an end to Freddy Krueger, along with the backstory of how Freddy became a serial killer and how he got his powers. I really like the lore, and it's almost like this could have been pretty scary and badass, like one of the best movies of this franchise, but the flaws are what totally ruin it, which everyone knows. This is Freddy when he's not even scary in the slightest, when he's just cracking jokes, playing everyone like a cartoon character, and says very corny one-liners like, "It's traveling time, you forgot the power glove," and stuff like that. And in my opinion, though, despite how bad this movie is for a lot of people, I don't think it's as bad as the remake. Like, this movie is literally like Wes Craven's New Nightmare compared to the remake? Or Dream Warriors, the original, or almost any good movie you can think of compared to the remake, for me. Enough said. Coming in at the top 7 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Yeah, I'd say this movie is better than Freddys Den. Most people can agree with me on that, but still, they consider it one of the worst, and I don't blame them. Mainly because this is when Freddy started to get a little too comedic. Because all the corny one-liners like, "You are what you eat," ah ha ha ha. And along with the infamous Super Freddy scene, and as we all know, Super Freddy sucks. However, at least it doesn't get cartoonish like Freddys Den. But the plot of the story is really good, about invading the dreams of an unborn child. And just the supernatural gothic elements of this tone I really like. And it has a good way of expanding the lore of this franchise. However, the one major flaw that really brings it down is the comedy. Which, comedy in horror movies isn't always a bad thing, but when you're making the villain like this, it's not very good. Like, it's fine giving horror villains the dark sense of humor, but in this movie, he is just straight up goofy, like he is in Freddys Den. Coming in at the top 6 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Now, from here on up, these are all movies that are at least decent. So, there's some good parts in this movie, and some bad parts in this movie. It has the best kill of the franchise, which was the scene where the girl is lifting weights, but then her arms break and she becomes a spider, and then Freddy squishes her. The way it was seen in it was really gruesome, which is what I liked about it. And then there was also some other fun moments here as well, but people tend to compare this to movies like Alien 3, how they kill off the survivors of the last film. But the problems with this movie, this is where Freddy was slowly starting to become comedic. Not as bad as the next two movies, but not as scary as he was in the first three either. And there was also a scene where Freddy puts on sunglasses after killing somebody in the sand. But one part I thought was weird was how Freddy comes back with dog piss. It was weird. And also when he says, "Welcome to my world, Alice." Yeah, it was clearly a joke talking to the audience in a way. But it did have its good moments as well. I also didn't like the scene where there was that karate moment. It looked pretty bad, so not a terrible movie, but not great either. This is just okay in my opinion. Coming at the top 5 is Freddy vs. Jason. Now, from here on up, these are all the movies that I consider to be good. Now, I've always had enjoyment watching this movie. I've seen it 3 times at least. And I feel like the flaws of it start to point out a little bit more than they did the last time. Like, during the first, maybe even the second time I watched this, I used to think this was like one of the best films in both franchises. And mainly because this movie, in some way, is a flawed masterpiece because of how it did something that almost no movie has done before, which was bringing 2 continuities of franchises and putting them together, which led to a lot of movies like Alien vs. Predator, The Avengers, and Godzilla vs. Kong coming out. And of course, this was also bound to happen because of Jason Goes to Hell, and where it had Freddy's glove coming out of the ground. So, here's what I liked about it. It was great idea, with also very entertaining, had an impressive storyline, and nice way of setting up Freddy and Jason's rivalry. And it was also kind of nice how, with Freddys Dead, the final nightmare was about Freddy dying and obviously going to hell, and then Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, which did the same thing, had Freddy there, and then crossover happened, which is why when Halloween Ends became a thing, I was wondering if it was going to set up a crossover, but spoiler alert for those who are not familiar with the Halloween franchise, Michael dies, so it's not going to happen, unfortunately, but oh well. And then, okay, I'm just going to talk about the flaws now. The CGI in this movie is pretty bad, like, at least compared to the practical effects from the earlier movies, like the original Nightmare on Elm Street or Dream Warriors. Like, there's a scene where Freddy becomes a centipede and stuff. I understand it was a possession thing, but thought that they should have done practical effects. And they also done. This movie's also bloody. That's one of the good things about it. But that thing is, some of the moments can be kind of cringy, like Freddy playing with Jason like a ping pong ball, or the scene where Freddy's in Jason's dreams, and then because 2 counselors were having sex, Freddy was one of them, and the way it was moved around, I thought that was like strange and unnecessary to put in there. Because I'm like, I understand it's a slasher movie, but you don't need that many sex in horror movies to make it a good slasher film. I mean, Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives had almost none, and that worked. There was also gonna be a crossover comic, Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, which is from Evil Dead. But then it got canceled for creativity reasons, and differences, should I say. And considering how Evil Dead Rise just came out, Nightmare on Elm Street is in development hell after Um, the remake bombed at the box office, while Friday the 13th seems to have different plans right now. It's probably not going to happen on the big screen, unfortunately. But the comic, though, is very entertaining and crazy. Maybe a little too crazy. But it's entertaining, though, and it was understandable why they thought of it, because the Book of Necronomicon was in Jason Goes to Hell, but then... Also, another problem I had with this movie is... the fact that it took so long for them to make this movie, because I thought it was strange how they made Jason X just to make people excited for Jason while Freddy vs. Jason was in development hell. Yet I feel like, I don't know why it was in development hell for the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, though, considering it was by New Line. But that's basically my thoughts on the movie. Coming in at the top 4 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddys Revenge. Now, I couldn't tell which one I liked more between this or Freddy vs. Jason, because Freddy vs. Jason is, well, more fun, but I think this is a bit more serious, well, except for a few parts, but I'll get into that later. Like, I think that Freddy was scarier here, and like the concept of him possessing somebody, but the thing I find weird is how we see a couple scenes where Jesse's ass is showing. Why did I say Ash? I'm thinking of Ash Williams or something, but totally unrelated. I just got done talking about Evil Dead. Although, yeah, it was just kind of weird, and along with him walking outside naked. Yeah, that was weird, but I still thought it was a pretty good movie overall, even if it did have a couple flaws. And I didn't really think this was unnecessary, really, considering how the original kind of left a cliffhanger with Freddy pulling Nancy's mom through the door, but I think that could have been good for one and done, even though I still felt like it definitely was setting up a sequel. Coming in at the top 3 is A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Now, from here on up, these are all perfect movies, and this has always been a great film for me, because it's got all these supernatural stuff where it feels like a fantasy movie, and it's just really fun, but it's also pretty scary, and at the same time, it has some incredible practical effects. And it also could have been made for a satisfying ending, too, which a lot of people even agree on that. And it also gets more into Freddy's backstory, and Nancy returns, and she has her final confrontation with Freddy. And there's no question why this is a fan favorite. Coming in at the top 2 is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, this is where it's in the category of what I would say some of the best horror movies ever made. These top 2 are. Okay, I was talking like Yoda, I was. Anyway, this is just a really good movie because it was a predecessor for Scream, which Wes Craven would make 2 years later. And it was also a really huge step up from Freddys Den. And it takes a very unique approach that no other horror movie franchise has ever done before. And is one of the things that makes A Nightmare on Elm Street work so well is this film steps outside the continuity, but it's still part of the series because it takes place in a world that's like ours, where Nightmare on Elm Street is a fictional universe, but this has a demon pretending to be Freddy Krueger attack Heather Langenkamp. And the thing that makes it better is also how this film is like one of the main things that prove why, if they ever do decide to do Nightmare on Elm Street movies again, the possibilities are endless for what they can do. They can go with other movies that step outside the continuity and do something unique. Like maybe something like a cult of serial killers dressing up as Freddy Krueger to attack people. I don't know. But that might be ripping off of other stuff. But my point is, though, the thing with this is, if you were to watch the Nightmare on Elm Street series canonically, like just the series, then it would be watching the first 6 movies, and then this, and then Freddy vs. Jason. And because this is still part of the series, even though it's not canon. Kind of like Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, where it's still part of the series, or was until it got taken out. But it takes place in a different universe. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about this movie. And it's always been one of my favorite horror movies, too. And I even once thought this was the best of the franchise. But I think my number 1 is still more consistent. Coming in at first place is the original Nightmare on Elm Street. This is one of the best horror movies I've ever seen, and one of the scariest, I think, too. It's very creative, and it's basically a good combination of both classic 1980s demon horror movies and slasher flicks. And I guess another reason I just like this the most is because the story is the most original and scariest, and, well, anyone who's a fan of the franchise can't really argue with me. Usually people say Dream Warriors is the best, with still a lot of people, including me, saying the original. And New Nightmare is a fan favorite. Even Robert Englund, the actor who plays Freddy Krueger, for those of you who don't know, he said that New Nightmare was his favorite. So, yeah, that was my ranking. Tell me yours in the comments below, and I want to apologize for the delay of this video. It's just I had other video ideas planned and haven't been comfortable making videos lately, but I wish I had more time. Anyway, like this video, subscribe if you're new, and let me know what you thought of my ranking.